I hope you're having a really good day today. I've been noticing some really interesting things in session over the last week or so, and I wanted to come on and share a little bit about this topic of connection and separation. And so, if you watched my energy update for the month, I said that there are going to be a couple of really important themes that are almost in conflict with one another. And I'm definitely seeing that in very interesting ways, and I'll talk about that in just a second. But the two themes that I'm going to speak about today are this notion of when to let go and create separation, and when to reconnect and connect. And those are on opposing sides of the energy spectrum, those two themes, but they're very much happening in tandem this month at the same time, which is creating a lot of confusion in the field. And so I'm going to try to do my best to explain what I'm seeing so maybe you all can relate to these energy frequencies that are up this month. And I'll also say that anger continues to be a thread or a theme that is woven into these bigger energy topics that we're working this month. And so you may be finding that you have a very short fuse, or that there are conflicts and power struggles coming forward right now in a really intense way. Maybe even old power struggles or old patterns are rearing their heads, or being brought forward in a new way at the moment. And so Mars is very, very close to the Earth right now, and that is contributing a good bit to what we're experiencing here as a collective. And we also are in a portal of clearing grief and anger and clearing out blockers to the divine feminine frequency, fully anchoring by the end of the year in December. And so a lot of stuff is being stirred up. But what I want to specifically talk about today is some stuff I'm seeing in session with clients around this idea that we hold our truth, we hold back our authentic self for fear of not being perfect and for fear of showing up in a way that other people will not like. And what that creates in our field when we are not showing up in our authentic self and not speaking our truth is a high degree of separation. And oftentimes we will choose to not show up in our authentic truth or to not share our authentic truth with people because we're afraid that if we do, we're not going to be accepted. And it's very interesting because that actually creates this self-fulfilling prophecy where when we don't show up in our authentic self, we actually don't truly let people in, and we always keep people at an arm's length. And that means that we actually never are received and fully connecting with our soul family as we are meant to here in the human experience. And so by showing up and trying to be perfect or be what you think other people want you to be, we actually create more separation between us and those around us. And we end up calling in people into our lives that are really not maybe the best fit for us. And I'm not even just speaking about romantic partners, although that is a very, very big topic that I'm seeing right now, where we have lots of people coming to me that are releasing relationships or trying to release relationships with romantic partners that are no longer in alignment, and realizing that they called in something that wasn't really what they wanted, and having to unpack the reason for them calling in that person. But I'm also speaking about friendships and work colleagues and work situations, really anything, any situation or person that you interact with in this lifetime will be impacted by your authenticity. And when we're not showing up in our authenticity, that there's always a level of separation, meaning our heart is closed down, and the person or thing that we're interacting with truly cannot receive our true frequency and receive our heart frequency if we're not in our authenticity. And so many of us carry perfection energy, and that perfection energy has been there because we have had some bad experiences, or we've had somebody who has interacted with us and maybe didn't like us. And so we've taken that feedback that maybe was right or maybe was wrong from the person that didn't like us, and we've changed our behavior because we think that we're wrong. And sometimes we need to look at how people are reflecting back to us and what people are saying to us and make changes. Sometimes there is validity in the fact that we need to change, how we're showing up in the world. Maybe we need to show up with more compassion. We need to show up with more, bravery, more courage. But oftentimes when somebody doesn't like us, it's not actually that we need to change. It's often that there is some frequency that they are carrying, some wound, some trauma that they are carrying, that when they come into contact with our field, there's friction. And that friction comes from the fact that likely you are carrying some version of that same wound. And so when people don't like us, or we are feeling uncomfortable when we're in an interaction with somebody and we just kind of know that they don't really, they're not really picking up what we're putting down, there's a really big tendency for us to want to please that other person. And the moment we start to want to please that other person and start to look for their affection and try for their affection, we step out of our energy field and into theirs. We basically step out of our truth and we step into their truth. And that becomes very problematic very quickly, because when we're running somebody else's truth through our frequency field, we are not in our highest light and we are not in boundary. And oftentimes that creates fireworks in our relationships. And it creates these bits of tension where, because we're having trouble showing up in our authenticity, there's a level of uncomfortability that exists in that relationship. And I know you all have probably experienced this. There's maybe somebody in your new friend group and they come in and immediately you're like, oh, that person doesn't like me. And so instead of just accepting that maybe there's something vibrating in them and something vibrating in you, and those two things are somewhat at war with each other, and just giving them space and looking inside of yourself and figuring out, ooh, I wonder what it is that they're carrying that I am also carrying, and doing the inner work, you go about trying to make them like you. And when you go about trying to make them like you, you get all up in their space, you put your energy in their space, and then you start running their truth, and there's this really chaotic thing that happens, and sometimes it explodes. And other times you walk away from that situation feeling really defeated and really down on yourself and feeling like there's something wrong with you. And all you're doing is giving away your sovereignty in that situation. So it's important that when we bump up against somebody's frequency and we start to realize that they don't like us or that they're uncomfortable around us, that we actually come back home into ourselves and look at what it is that they're mirroring for us. What is happening within them that is also happening within us? And sometimes that can be really hard because we are very good at compartmentalizing and hiding parts of ourselves and pretending like they don't exist. And 9 times out of 10, the parts of you that are in conflict are your inner children. And so maybe they had a childhood where they were not seen, they were not appreciated, they were not loved. And so they went out and they started to seek validation, and they started to make themselves bigger, their personality bigger, so that they could receive love. And they started to build up their ego and puff out their chest and try to be the best version of themselves so people would love them. And maybe you've done the same thing. Maybe there are parts of your life where you're not in your authenticity because you want validation, and you've puffed up your chest and you've made your ego bigger as well. And both of those things might be happening at the inner child level, and both of those things might be happening at the adult level too. And so when we encounter people who don't like us, it's not up to us to get them to like us. It's not up to us to change our behavior, unless, of course, we're being really negative and mean and nasty. But it's not up to us to change who we are so that other people will accept us. Because that never works. It creates more tension, it creates more conflict, and it just takes you out of your sovereignty. And the more times you do that, it almost becomes a habit. And then eventually you'll wake up one day and you're not even sure who you are, because you've spent your entire life trying to please everybody around you and be the person that they want you to be, and you've completely lost who you are. And we are in a time right now where a lot of these power struggles and a lot of these dynamics where we have been showing up not in our authenticity or pretending to be something that we're not to make other people happy are coming forward to be cleared. And so you may have some conflict arising in your life right now with people that you've always gotten along with. And maybe that's because there's some part of you that hasn't been showing up to that relationship in authenticity. And it doesn't mean that that relationship has to be completely cleared and released from your life. It just may mean that both of you have to up level and come into a higher frequency in relationship together. And what that often looks like is clear and direct and authentic communication. It means taking everything that you've been holding inside, everything that you've been pretending not to be, everything that you've been holding back, and just letting it out. And that sometimes includes our angry self. That sometimes includes our whiny self. That sometimes includes our sad self that maybe we don't let anybody see. And if you can allow all the parts of you to show up in that relationship and put all of your cards on the table, and they can still see you and they can still love you and they can still show up for you, then you know you have found your soul family. You know you have found somebody that is truly meant to be in your life and truly meant to connect with you for the long haul. And if you take all of the parts of you and you put them on the table and that person can't receive it, that may mean that you need to take a break from that relationship. It may mean that you need to let that relationship go, or it just may mean that they're not ready yet. And you need to give them some time and some space to do the same, to find those authentic parts of themselves and bring those to the table as well. And relationships are complicated and relationships are messy and they're not one size fits all. And so this month we're navigating, where do we put our time and energy? Where do we put our resources? Who do we invest more in? Where are we being well received and authentically received? And leaning into those relationships. And then which relationships are we having to put in a lot of energy just to make the other person happy? Just to make sure that they're okay, just to make sure that they accept us and we're exhausted. And some of those relationships where we're putting all that extra energy in and it's still not being received and we still feel exhausted may need to go. We may need to make space for more soul family to come in. And so I want you to think of the month of October as you looking out across your landscape of where you're putting your time and your energy and deciding where it feels good, where it feels aligned, and devoting more time there. And if you're finding places in your life where the energy feels heavy and dense and not in alignment, taking a pause. I'm not telling you you need to cut everybody out of your life and let go of them completely, but take a pause and redirect some of that energy towards where things are flowing. And this is not just for relationships, this is for projects, this is for work endeavors, this is for hobbies. Anything where you're putting energy towards this month, pay close attention to, is it fulfilling? Am I receiving as much as I'm giving? And if not, I'm going to take a pause and just pull back, reframe, look at, and evaluate if that's somewhere where I want to continue moving. And if you can do that in the month of October, it's going to set you up for November and December where there's a lot of new energy, new excitement, new creativity, new flow coming into the field. Because we have to make space. We are both finite and infinite individuals. We have physical bodies that have a finite amount of energy that we can deal with and work with during the day. And we are infinite individuals in that we are source beings and we can do anything. And so again, you see the polarity, right? We have both infinite and finite energy. And it's in finding harmonization between those two polarities that we find our zone of genius. We find our creative zone of genius where we can actually have a beautifully passionate and purpose-driven life. And so I'm offering a little bit of information this month about these themes throughout the weeks of October so that you can start to work with them and start to work within this polarity. So pay attention to where your energy is flowing. Pay attention to where you're having to be perfect or be something that you're not, and decide if you want to keep putting your energy into that. Decide if it's worth it. And some of you may choose that it is worth it, that there's more work to do there. There's more soul contracts to complete. And some of you may decide that those relationships have come to a close, or those hobbies or those work activities or those projects have come to a close, and that's okay too. So pay attention to what needs to be released and what needs to be anchored in and reconnected with more. So those are just a couple of themes that I'm seeing right now. I hope you all are doing really well in navigating these energies. We've got a lot of mental body energy going on, a lot of overthinking, a lot of people in their head. And so really work to get grounded, really work to get into your lower energy centers, into your root chakra, get onto the land, get in nature, open up those lower energy centers so you can get grounded and get out of your head and stop overthinking. Use that mental body energy well by taking a look at where you are putting your energy and what's aligned. Use your mental body energy for that. Don't be overthinking how you're showing up in the world. So I hope everybody has a great day. Thanks for tuning in, and I will see you again next week.